We all know how good James Pearce is here at Tennessee, but how good can he be in relation to the NFL draft in 2025? Could he be number one overall? One writer from Pro Football Focus says that he could be. He'll come on the show today and explain why he loves James Pearce, Nico Iamaleava, and a whole lot of the Tennessee Volunteers. All that and more. It's your Thursday Locked On Vols.
You are Locked On Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, good Thursday morning, everybody. Welcome to Locked On Vols. We are a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every single day. Shout out everydayers for making this show what it is, and of course, making Locked On Vols your first listen, your first watch each and every day. You can watch us, listen to us, subscribe to us, and download us for absolutely free of charge wherever you get your podcasts, and of course on the Locked On Vols YouTube channel. If you do that, you can continue to help grow the show and get this in front of more and more Tennessee fans. I'm your host, Eric Kane. Thank you so much for being here and starting your Thursday with us and your commute to work. Maybe you're in the gym, maybe you're already in the cubicle, wherever and whenever you're listening to the show. Can't thank you enough. Shout out to our friends over at Nissan, a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. Take on the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, Nissan Armada, and go find your next big adventure today. You can shop NissanUSA.com. We got a loaded show coming up. Max Chadwick, Pro Football Focus, is going to join the show and tell you why he believes James Pearce of Tennessee can be the number one overall draft pick in 2025. He'll talk about Nico Iamaleava, Joe Milton, Jaylen, Wright, what he likes about the Vols in 2024, all that and more. I know a lot of people don't like Pro Football Focus, but I promise you, Tennessee fans, you're going to want to listen to this over the next two segments here in 1 and 2, and then I'm going to get you set for Tennessee and St. Peter's. That is coming up here in segment number 3 as we get going for the NCAA Tournament. So without further ado, let me welcome on Max Chadwick of Pro Football Focus. He's going to tell you why he loves James Pearce and why James Pearce could be the number one overall draft pick, not this year, but next year. You said that potentially James Pearce could be, at least in the conversation, of being the number one overall draft pick, not this year, but in next year's draft class in 2025. Kind of what was your thought process behind making that statement?
Well, Eric, thanks for having me on, man. And yeah, that kind of, made waves for a lot of people. And I even had some Tennessee fans reach out to me like, wow, I did not really see that coming from James Pearce. I love the kid. I think he is the number one edge rusher in college football heading into next year. He was spectacular as a true sophomore this past season. He had the third best pressure rate in the country, third best pass rushing grade. He is a freak athlete, man. He's 6'5", 242, freakish size to speed to power, He converts that really, really well. I just think he's got the athleticism, he's got the production. And the reason why I think he has a potential to go number one overall is because the quarterback class next year doesn't look quite as strong as years past. And usually, of course, it's a position that usually always goes number one in the draft. It doesn't really seem like there's a true guy. Like, we knew about Caleb Williams, we knew about Drake May going into this past season. Carson Beck and Shedeur Sanders seem to be the guys right now, but I don't know if an NFL team, both of them could have declared for the draft this year, and both of them might have been, Shedeur might have been a second round pick, Beck might have been maybe a mid first or late first round pick. So I just don't think there's a true, slam dunk quarterback prospect next year, which is why I think a guy like James Pearce Jr. could be ultimately the pick for the team at number one next year.
There's a lot to like about his game. Obviously, he's long, lengthy, explosive. He's got a good frame to where he can add even more weight. He's already added some weight. He probably could afford to add a few more pounds as well. What do you like about his game when you turn on the tape?
Yeah, I think it's just the athleticism, man. It's just he's got obviously the size that you look for in an NFL edge defender at 6'5", 242, the length like you mentioned before too. And then it's just the speed to power, man, that he converts at such an elite level. I mean, he is truly, his get off is fantastic. He beats offensive tackles. He's getting off the ball quicker than the offensive tackles he's facing, honestly. And that leads to a lot of early pressures. And then even if the offensive tackle gets off the ball quicker than him, he can still run right through them, honestly. We see that a couple times. I think this guy's potential is through the roof. I still think he could add more pass rushing moves to his toolbox because it seems like he's winning a lot off of athleticism right now. But the fact that he's winning basically only off his athleticism and is still that dominant in the SEC should terrify opposing teams, because if this guy learns more pass rushing moves, he could be unstoppable, honestly. So I truly think, like, and again, edge defender is one of those positions. If it's not a quarterback going number one overall, edge defender has always been one of the positions that would always go number one if it's not a quarterback. So that makes me feel a little bit better about him, because I think not only is he one of the best players in college football, he plays a very valuable position that the NFL teams have proven in the past to covet at the top of the draft. So Trayvon Walker go number one overall, Myles Garrett went number one overall, David Clowney. The list goes on and on. I think there's a chance. Again, I'm not saying he will be the number one overall pick next year, but I do think there's a really solid chance. If it's a non-quarterback, James Pearce Jr. is probably the first non-quarterback I'm looking at to go number one next year.
Well, we're going to hold you to it here on Locked On Vols. So if he doesn't go number one, we're going to be filling up that inbox with some complaints. Yeah, you mentioned obviously the position of importance. It's edge, getting after the passer. When you're building a roster in the NFL, and now even with name, image, and likeness at your hand in college football, quarterback, getting after the quarterback, kind of the two pillars of recruiting classes or in the transfer portal needs. Who were some of those other names right now, along with James Pearce, in terms of getting after the quarterback from the edge that could be in that conversation? And understanding, I know that there's a whole season to play and there could be some more guys who emerge.
Yeah, so I think if you're just looking at edge defender, I think the next guy who was number 2 in my ranking and might be probably edge 2 in the draft next year is Nick Scourton, who was the Purdue edge defender, just transferred to Texas A&M this past winter, basically. So he's a really, really powerful edge defender, 6'4", 260, has a nasty spin move that he uses a lot, honestly. So it's surprising to see a guy that big able to move the way he does. So I do think there's a pretty big gap between James Pearce Jr. and all the other edge defenders in college football. But, if you're asking me who's the next edge to potentially come off the board in the NFL draft, I would probably look at Nick Scourton right now, the new Texas A&M edge defender.
And that kind of leads us into the other conversation. Like, if it's not necessarily quarterback, it's probably someone getting after the quarterback. But any names that you haven't mentioned already that could kind of be in that conversation right now, again, over a year out, looking ahead, that is kind of vying for that number one job or that number one draft pick heading into 2025?
Yes. So I actually put out a tweet when that Pearce graphic came out, and just putting out some guys I think are number one overall, and a lot of people did not like the list I had. It was, I think the quarterbacks I put on it, Carson Beck and Shedeur Sanders, I think are the clear two guys that NFL teams are really going to like. Quinn Ewers, I think, has a shot at it. I even threw Drew Aller and Jaylen Moreau on it. Now, I know they are kind of a ways off compared to those other three guys, but I think they have really high potential. I think Drew Aller is kind of hamstrung by Penn State supporting cast. So if that improves, I think Aller has the potential to go high. And then Moreau, I mean, he reminds me a lot of like an Anthony Richardson, where it's just raw, but man, he's got tools for days, man. And getting a coach like Kalen DeBoer in there from Washington, who did really excellent work with Michael Penix Jr., that excites me with Jaylen Moreau. He's got an excellent offensive line protecting him too. So I think Moreau, I don't think he will end up being a first overall pick. I just wanted to throw him in there because I think he's got the tools. Connor Wegman from Texas A&M, I think is a really good quarterback too. And as for non-quarterbacks, I think it's a really long list, honestly. I think James Pearce Jr., like I said, is the number one guy for me, but Will Campbell, the offensive tackle from LSU, he's been fantastic for 2 years. He has a chance to go number one. Kelvin Banks Jr., I think, will also be probably a top 5, top 10 pick. Corners really never go number one, but if it will happen, it might be Will Johnson, the corner from Michigan. I think he's got a good chance. I love Harold Perkins, but I just don't see an off-ball linebacker going number one, and I don't think it's a size. He's only about 220 pounds. I don't think he's a size to really fully play edge defender, even though he's flashed some really intriguing stuff when he's played there. I'm trying to think if there's anyone else. Luther Burden III, Tetairoa McMillan, 2 receivers. Again, receiver rarely goes number one, even though it's probably the second most valuable position in the NFL right now. Those are 2 guys I would keep an eye on as well. But yeah, it's a wide open draft, man, next year. That's really the one takeaway I want people to have from this is like, going into last year, we're kind of like, okay, Caleb Williams, maybe Drake May, and then everyone else. Like Marvin Harrison Jr., maybe if a team that doesn't need a quarterback has number one. We kind of knew like the top guys were like, okay, these are like these 4 guys we know. And then all year that really proved to be correct. And like Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Drake May are still going to be top 5 picks in the draft. So it's not surprising at all. And even Joe Alt, I would throw in that too, but I kind of knew Joe Alt was a superstar even before. This is kind of like a wide open one where it's like, okay, there's some guys I really like, but it's not like a slam dunk. Okay, this guy's definitely going to be a top 5, top 10 pick. It's pretty wide open right now, especially in the quarterback class. So that's why I kind of want to throw out a lot of names in that quarterback class because I could see any one of them taking that number one spot right now.
Yeah, it's certainly a fun conversation to have because we're talking about guys right now, looking ahead to 2025's NFL draft, but all these guys are going to be playing college football here this fall, and James Pearce, of course, is going to be among them. Last thing on James Pearce before we kind of shift some gears here. You mentioned earlier, if he can develop some more moves off the edge and more pass rushing moves and everything, what else about his game does he need to maybe enhance to solidify him as being in that, the top 5, top 10 conversation?
So I think James Pearce, obviously, again, like I said, the pass rushing moves is definitely something he can work on. The other thing I would say, he was not a great run defender this past year. Had a 68.3 run defense grade. I think he could do a little bit better job of setting the edge in that aspect. Again, that's not nearly as valuable as being a pass rusher, which is why I think he still has a great chance to go number 1. Like if he was a dominant run defender and a below average pass rusher, like there wouldn't be any really talks about him potentially going number 1. And he's lucky that's the other way around. Not even lucky. I mean, that's kind of the player he is. But I think if he can add more pass rushing moves, that'll make him even more unstoppable as a pass rusher. He already is probably the best pass rusher in college football heading into next year. But also if he can do a little bit better job of setting the edge in the run game and maybe adding some more strength in that area, I think that'll help him out too in terms of his NFL evaluation.
A good start to our conversation with Max Chadwick, a Pro Football Focus. We'll have part 2, where he'll discuss plenty more about what he likes about Tennessee, Nico Iamaleava, and of course Vols in the NFL draft both this year and next year in regards to James Pearce maybe being that number 1 overall pick. More of my conversation with Max Chadwick, and it's coming up next. This week's March Madness bracket is brought to you by our friends over at Nissan. Each week, we're picking one team that stands out, a team that's pushed it further than the rest, just like any of the all-new 2024 Nissan SUVs. These guys were able to take it to the next level. Let's talk about the Tennessee Volunteers in the regular season, SEC regular season champs. That can be described as a Pathfinder. Thrilling to watch. Great defense. Of course, Dalton Knecht, SEC Player of the Year. So much fun, and why Tennessee finished off the regular season strong with a 3-1 record over the toughest 2-week stretch of any basketball team in college hoops at that point in time. So set to take on St. Peter's. We'll get in that preview coming up in segment number 3. The 2 versus the 15 seed in the Midwest. Can't wait to see that, but Tennessee Volunteers can certainly be described as a Nissan Pathfinder. What about the Oregon Ducks, who played their way into the NCAA Tournament, winning the Pac-12 Tournament, the final Pac-12 Tournament? They say win live, go rogue. That's what the Oregon Ducks did as well. You got the Nissan Pathfinder, Nissan Rogue, and of course the Nissan Armada. You can challenge them. Find your next big adventure today, all by doing that over at shopnissanusa.com. So as always, a huge thanks to our friends over at Nissan, and a huge thanks to our friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook. Say goodbye to busted brackets, because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tournament. Whether you're betting on a big upset, it's happened before, a 16-over-1, could it happen again? Or you could be betting on that number 1 seed to win it all. It's time to go dancing over at America's number 1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all, plus individual prop bets and more. The NCAA Tournament is so much fun. You can put some coin in your pocket over there at FanDuel Sportsbook. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon, where new customers can win $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. All that and more. FanDuel.com/lockedon to bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. All that. It's FanDuel.com/lockedonballs. This is kind of a bigger conversation, and obviously you can simplify it for us here and be concise. But, I use Pro Football Focus on so much of my work, my written work right here on Locked On Balls. I have a segment on Monday or on Wednesday of every single week during football season where we kind of go through and look not just the specific grades, but also, snap counts, pass rushing, defensive backs and coverage, stuff like that. Really, really enjoy the work. How do you guys go about tracking all that stuff, kind of the system? How do you guys come up with individual grades for a player from a specific game?
Yeah, it's luckily a job that I do not have to do because it is I host a show called the PFF College Football Show. You can check out on YouTube anywhere you get your podcast. And my co-host Dalton does that. He actually is one of the people that tracks it, and it is a time-intensive process, man. As you can imagine, when you're trying to grade every single player on every single play in every single game, and we do that from the NFL level to FBS to FCS to even some D2 and D3. And then also like CFL, the new UFL is coming out now. Like we're doing everything. So they are doing the Lord's work doing that because you gotta, first of all, it's a very highly trained thing. Like I would not, even if I wanted to do it, they would not let me do it because you have to be trained by these professionals who were also trained by former coaches and former players at those positions saying, hey, this is what you should be looking for. So it's not some Joe Schmo looking at it and saying, oh, that guy messed up, even though he has no idea what he's supposed to do. No, our guys who grade are very highly trained. And even then, their grades then go to a secondary, more expert level, or more expert, I should say, like a higher up at the company. They then check the grades and go over them. So it's kind of a, check your own work thing, which is really, really good, I think. But yeah, so how we grade it, basically, to explain to the people is we grade on a +2 to -2 scale in 0.5 increments. So basically what that means is if you get a +2, that's basically the best play you ever could have made at that play. So you get a +2 in that play. -2 is the worst play you could have made. +1.5, really, really great play that you just made. +1, really good play. 0.5, you went above and beyond your job. And then you get a 0 for just doing your job, basically. Yeah. And then obviously it's the opposite. So -0.5, is below average your job. -1's pretty, you had a bad play. -1.5 is a really bad play. And then obviously -2 is horrible. So we combine all those grades for that player from the game into one grade. And then we convert it into a 0 to 100 scale to make it more digestible. So you don't just see like a +16.5 and say, what the hell does that mean? Like, or a -8.5. We converted to a 0 to 100 scale because we thought, kind of like the Madden ratings, how it's like, oh, I understand what an 88 overall means. Like that means the guy's really good. That's how we converted it to that. So it's a very complicated process. And again, it's something that not anyone can do without extensive training. And it's not perfect. The grades are never perfect. That's something I always wanted to reiterate, because I know people always like to think that we think that they are, like Bible, but it's really not, honestly. So it's still a really, really valuable tool in addition to a lot of the other tools that we have at PFF. But it's kind of the rundown of how we make those grades.
Yep, and that's what I always say. I say it's something, it's not everything, and it's something that I use again for a lot of my work. And that kind of, it's interesting because that kind of goes into I don't have it off the top of my head. I have it written down somewhere, but like the elite grade is like 90 to 99. Like the above average is 80 to 89. And then when you get all the way down to average, it's like 60 to 69. Whereas if you're getting a graded, paperback in school, 65 is not what you want. But according to PFF, like that's average. Yeah. So that's really interesting there. Hey, let's look ahead to this year's NFL draft. Obviously, Tennessee's got a couple of prospects highlighted by Jaylen Wright. Might be the number one running back taken. If he's not number one, he's probably top 3. Really, really good. Pro day coming up, but of course the NFL Combine. Joe Milton, who is in that conversation like Anthony Richardson and Jalen Milroe, of having all the physical tools you could possibly want. But what does that mean in terms of NFL draft based on his play at Tennessee? I want to know what you think about Jaylen Wright, Joe Milton, and then maybe some others, maybe Kamal Hadden at cornerback, and maybe even McCallan Castles at tight end, who could be drafted coming up.
Yeah, I think starting off with probably the biggest name is Jaylen Wright, the running back. And I think, like you said, he has a chance to be the number one running back off the board, honestly. And I think it's a really wide open running back class this year. In that it's not a really strong running back class, I should say. I don't think there's a single running back. I would be surprised if there was a running back taken within the first 50 picks of the NFL draft. I even think there's a chance that we might not get any running backs in the first 2 rounds, honestly. But I think Jaylen Wright will be one of the first running backs off the board, along with guys like Jonathan Brooks and Blake Corum from Michigan. I think Wright, like you mentioned, he's a freak athlete. He also might be the best pass protecting back in the entire draft, which is a very valuable thing, more valuable than some fans even realize. So we'll be able to get on the field immediately in that aspect. But yeah, like you said, he's a freak athlete at a position where athleticism is paramount, man. There are some positions where you can get away with not being a world-class athlete. Running back is really not one of them. It is really hard to be a really good running back in the NFL without being a really talented athlete. And Jaylen Wright is one of the most talented athletes in the entire draft, regardless of position, honestly. So I'm excited about to see what he could do at the next level. He was obviously very productive for Tennessee this past season. I think, if he can keep progressing his game, because I think, again, like James Pearce a little bit, he kind of relies on athleticism a little bit too much. But if he keeps developing his vision, man, I really think that guy can be a number one running back in the NFL. So I think Jaylen Wright, expect him to be one of the first 3 running backs off the board, in my opinion, and probably somewhere late second round, early third rounds where I expect him to go. Joe Milton is speaking of athleticism, man. He has the strongest arm in the NFL draft, and probably will have a top 5 to 10 strongest arm in the NFL immediately when he walks in there. The problem is that it goes all over the place right now. You never know where that football is going to end up with Joe Milton. So obviously the tools for days, NFL teams will probably be intrigued by that, but I am a little bit weary of taking him too high in this year's draft. But again, he's got a ridiculous arm, and will probably be taken somewhere on day 3 just because of that arm and how absolutely absurd it is. He's so all over the place as a passer, and the instincts, the processing, the accuracy is just not there at an NFL level. If he does become a long-term starter in the NFL, it's going to take a few years, man. It's going to take a while. You might require the Jordan Love treatment, where it's just like, all right, this guy's going to sit for a while, and then maybe we'll see what we have in him. I don't really anticipate Milton being a starter in the NFL eventually, but I do think this would be a team that is going to take a shot at him on day 3. I love Kamal Haddon too, man. Kamal Haddon is a guy that I think has really been underrated in this whole process. He's been a star he was a really good player for Tennessee's past season. In fact, he had a passer rating allowed of 7 out of 158.3, by the way. So like a 7. I think spiking the ball every play gets you like a 37 rating. So basically, spiking the ball every play is a lot better than throwing at Kamal Haddon this past year. So he's a really, really good corner. I loved what he showed on tape this past year. Unfortunately, that injury kind of robbed us of that second half of the season from him. Mm-hmm. But I really thought he was a really good player. The McCallum Castles too. I don't really anticipate him being I don't know if he will get drafted, but I did like what he showed, obviously transferring in to Tennessee. I liked what he showed a little bit this past year. But again, that whole passing game for Tennessee was kind of, up and down just because of the inaccuracies of Joe Milton a lot. So I don't know if he'll get drafted. I doubt he will, but he's another guy you should keep an eye on for sure.
And then lastly, I want to look at this year's current team. What do you like about Tennessee in terms of, potential of, expanded college football playoffs, going for an SEC title under quarterback Nico Iamaleava, who will be in the 26 draft class. Other guys, maybe like Amari Thomas, who will be in this 25 class, and some other guys that maybe I'm not even mentioning right now. This current Tennessee team, who do you like from a PFF perspective?
Yeah, so obviously it starts and ends with James Pearce Jr. coming off that edge. He's an absolute superstar. But yeah, I gotta. So it's Nico Iamaleava. Can you say it again for me, please? Because I gotta learn it. Nico
Iamaleava.
Iamaleava. Okay, good. Okay, because I watched actually. So funny enough, I'm putting out this series on PFF where I'm not only ranking the top 10 players in college football at every position, I'm ranking the top 10 prospects at every position in the NFL draft if they were eligible to be drafted this year. So I can assure you that when the edge defenders come out, James Pearce Jr. will be the number 1 player on that board. I think he would be, if he was eligible for the 2024 draft, I think he would have been eligible. He would have been the first edge off the board, in my opinion. So he's probably going to be top 10 pick in my all eligible mock draft too, honestly. But Nico, I honestly think, so I put out my quarterbacks one already. He didn't make the top 10 just because we haven't seen much of him, but I did write him up as the 2026 prospect to know, because I think he is, there's 5-star quarterbacks in that 2023 class. I think he's got the most tools out of all of them. I think he's got a rocket arm. He can really do damage as a runner too. And then, man, he looked fantastic in that bowl game against Iowa. He had, I think, 3 rushing touchdowns. He had a couple big-time throws too. I am really, really excited to see what he can do in Josh Heupel's offense next year. And I think Tennessee fans should be really excited about it as well. So I know we're talking about the 2025 draft a little bit. I know it's way too early to talk about the 2026 draft, but I think he's got a really good shot at being one of the top quarterbacks in that draft just because of how crazy his tools are. And then he showed really good stuff against one of the best defenses in the country in Iowa in that bowl game. So I'm a big fan of him. And yeah, like I said, I like Tennessee next year, man. I think they're a top 20 team probably. And they could make some noise in what will be now the 12-team playoff era.
Pro Football Focus Max Chadwick is talking a lot of good things about Tennessee right now. So everybody listening and watching, you can't always say that Pro Football Focus always hates Tennessee, because Max over here is loving him some James Pearce Jr. for sure. Max, appreciate the extended time here on the show today. And where can more of my viewers follow your work?
Yeah, you can find it at pff.com. That's where all my articles live. You can follow me on Twitter at MaxChadwickCFB. And then, like I said, I host the PFF College Football Show, which you can find on YouTube and anywhere you get your podcast as well.
Awesome stuff, Max. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Eric.
Wasn't that fun? Listen, I know I use a lot of Pro Football Focus stuff when talking about Tennessee football, but I always say, and I said it right there in that interview with Max, it is a tool. It's something. It's not everything. It's a tool that I use to talk about Tennessee football, and I thought we got a nice little behind-the-scenes conversation with one of the guys that does it, how they come up with grades and all that type of stuff, and certainly what they think about James Pearce and what Max thinks about Joe Milton, Jaylen Wright, and Nico Iamaleava. Hope you enjoyed that conversation. I thought it was really, really good. And again, I guess it doesn't matter what I think, it's what you think. I think there was a lot of good stuff in there. Hey, when we come back, we're going to get you set for Tennessee in the NCAA Tournament. Tennessee takes on St. Peter's late tonight. Hopefully that game starts on time at 9:20 Eastern time, but I bet it'll start closer to 10 o'clock. Nonetheless, we're going to get you set, tell you everything you need to know about the Peacocks. That's coming up next as we conclude a Thursday Locked On Vols. Fire TV is your destination for sports. Live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies, TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball or the college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us at Locked On, with most of your big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV lets you dive into all the game analytics, analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date with the latest in the world of sports, from March Madness, which is happening right now, NBA, Major League Baseball, regular season games happened yesterday early in the morning, and a whole lot more. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, cooking videos as well. Check all this out at Fire TV channels on the Fire TV on Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. To learn more, visit www.amazon.com/lockedon Fire TV. We'll get you set for the Vols and Peacocks. That is coming up next. All right, it is NCAA Tournament basketball time, and your Tennessee Volunteers, the 2 seed in the Midwest region, is set to begin its journey tonight in Charlotte at the Spectrum Center against 15th seeded St. Peter's. Again, 9:20 is the scheduled first tip-off, or the first time Tennessee will tip off in the NCAA Tournament. My suggestion, I guess, would be don't count your chickens before they hatch on 9:20. I bet that those games will be pushed behind a little bit, but nonetheless, it's going to be a late night, and I can't wait to see what Tennessee does. Going to go ahead and get this out in the open. Listen, it's going to be a late game, all right? It's going to be a super late game. I'm not sure if I will have a recap of Tennessee versus St. Peter's on Friday's show. Going to be completely honest with you, because I don't know if I can get in front of a camera at 11:30 or midnight when I got some other stuff going on, so like sleep and other stuff throughout the day and early stuff Friday morning. But you know that we're going to recap everything that was St. Peter's, and by gosh, Tennessee better be playing on Saturday. All that, either over the weekend with a bonus episode, but if not, for sure on a Monday morning. But St. Peter's, I feel like people just get super scared when we first heard that Tennessee was going to take on St. Peter's. Not because Tennessee can't beat St. Peter's, but nobody ever heard of St. Peter's before. I didn't know about St. Peter's before the 2022 NCAA basketball tournament. And that is because it went on that run to the Elite Eight. It was a 15th seed taking on the 2-seeded Kentucky Wildcats in the East region in its opening matchup, and beat Kentucky 85-79 in overtime to start its Cinderella run. It took on Murray State, the 7th seed, in the round of 32, beat them by 10 at 70-60. Played Purdue in the Sweet 16, the 3-seeded Purdue Boilermakers won by 3 at 67-64. And then ultimately, it bowed out to UNC, North Carolina, in the Elite Eight, an 8 seed. But of course, Carolina, it's never, it's like Syracuse went on and made that run. UCLA went on and made that run as 11 seeds. UNC went on to the national championship this year in 2022 as an 8 seed. Those are not Cinderella stories. Those are blue bloods in the sport. And Carolina ended the Cinderella run of 15th seeded St. Peter's back in 2022, beaten up on them 69-49. in the Elite Eight matchup. But that's all we know about St. Peter's, right? I think it's important for us to remember that this St. Peter's club is not that one from 2022. Only one holdover, one player on the roster that's set to play against Tennessee tonight was on that 2022 squad. New coach as well. It's completely different. So don't let the Cinderella run that happened a couple years ago for St. Peter's fool you. Tennessee should win this game handily. In fact, FanDuel has Tennessee as 21.5-point favorites with a total sitting 129. That's a courtesy of our friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook. ESPN's matchup prediction gives Tennessee a 98% chance of victory. And all that's going to happen tonight in the Spectrum Center over at Charlotte. So who is this year's St. Peter's? Well, I'll tell you, 19-13 was the overall record, 12-8 in the MAAC. That is the Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference. They punched their ticket to the NCAA Tournament by defeating Fairfield University 68-63 in the MAAC Championship as a 5 seed. The St. Peter's Peacocks were a 5 seed. And they kind of started this little NCAA tournament run in their conference tournament championship or conference tournament when they won the quarterfinals, and then they went on in advance of to the semifinals, beat the 1 seed team in that conference on a buzzer beater to advance to the finals, where again they took down Fairfield University and punched their ticket to the NCAA tournament by picking up an automatic bid. So St. Peter's is the 15th seed in the Midwest region. Tennessee is the 2 seed in the Midwest region. These two teams have met only one time in program history. That was all the way back in 1984 when Tennessee defeated St. Peter's 54-40 in the first round of the NIT. Both these programs have come a long way since then, right? Tennessee, of course, with what it's done in recent memory, and St. Peter's, well, it has an Elite Eight run back in 2022, and that's high Tennessee for how many Elite Eights it's been to. We'll see if that can change this year for sure. St. Peter's is 1-0 all-time against SEC teams in the NCAA tournament, and of course, that was that opening round of 64 upset over Kentucky that started that Elite Eight run back in 2022, where they took down the Wildcats 85-79 in overtime. Tennessee in the NCAA tournament overall, 25-26, 6-5 under Rick Barnes. Tennessee has now made 6 straight NCAA tournament appearances and looking to make it a lengthy stay. St. Peter's, who to look out for? Well, they have 2 all-conference players. First team sophomore forward Corey Washington. He averaged 16.8 points per game to lead the Peacocks. 6.4 rebounds per game to lead the Peacocks. He scored 20-plus points in 9 games. He had 4 double-doubles on the year. Corey Washington will be the guy to try to lock down defensively, as he is what makes St. Peter's go. Now, much like Tennessee, it's a defensive-minded team. This year's Tennessee team is obviously very different because you have Dalton Knecht, but Rick Barnes is defense first, and that's kind of what St. Peter's is. St. Peter's has the Defensive Player of the Year in its conference, much like Tennessee does with Zakai Ziegler, and he is a senior guard by the name of Latrell Reed. Defensive Player of the Year and 3rd team all, what is that conference again? Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference. Latrell Reed, 11.4 points per game, 4.2 rebounds per game. He leads the team with 4.6 assists per game. He has 2 double-doubles, but he was also named the Defensive Player of the Year. A quick look at the stats, or a quick look at kind of where these two teams stack up heading into this matchup. I mean, again, it's David versus Goliath. That's what these early matchups are: 1 versus 16, 2 versus 15, 3 versus 14, so on and so forth. According to the net, Tennessee is ranked number 7. The Peacocks are ranked 188th. Ken Pom has Tennessee as its 7th ranked team. Ken Pom has St. Peter's at 187. The offensive adjacency efficiency rating, Tennessee has took a slide there after 2 losses, 29th in the country. Of course, it was top 15 for much of the year, that scoring 117 points per 100 possessions. So Tennessee, the 29th best offensive team in the country, according to Ken Pom's offensive adjusted efficiency rating, whereas the Peacocks rank 306th. Yes, you heard that right. 306th best offensive team in the land, where they scored 98.6 points per 100 possessions. So Tennessee is significantly better offensively than that of the Peacocks. Defensively, Tennessee is the 3rd best team according to the defensive adjusted efficiency rating. Number 3 in the country, allowing 91 points per 100 possessions, which is really good. The Peacocks, meanwhile, rank inside the top 100 at 78th in the country, allowing 100.9 points per 100 possessions. Quad 1 games, this will certainly be a quad 1 game. It's not like you're trying to beef up your resume anymore, but just to show you what St. Peter's has done against some quality competition this year, not so good. 0-1 against teams from quad 1, 0-2 in quad 2 games, 3-6 in quad 3 games, and 15-4 did handle business for much of its schedule in games that are considered quad 4. So is what it is. Tennessee starting this NCAA tournament run, and again, it's favored according to our friends over at FanDuel by 21 points and a half, 21.5. It'll take on St. Peter's, needs to handle business. Nothing's a give me this time of the year. It's why you call it March Madness for a reason. Do what you're supposed to do, beat up on the little guy and move on. And if you do move on and play on Saturday, you will take on the winner of Texas and Colorado State. Colorado State put the whooping on Virginia 67-42 in that play-in game on Tuesday night. It's just setting up for a Texas versus Tennessee showdown. Rick Barnes versus his old team showdown in the round of 32. You know that's kind of where this is headed. So Tennessee should handle business. Hopefully Tennessee handled business. And we'll see if I can get a bonus episode at some point in time over the weekend. But again, just going to be honest with you, it's don't think that I can make a show and produce a show and all that in the middle of the night. I'm just going to be completely real with you. But nonetheless, we'll see what happens. Big weekend coming up for Tennessee in the NCAA tournament. Spring practice continues on for Josh Heupel's football team, and we're going to recap everything right here on your number one spot for Tennessee athletics. This is VolQuest at volquest.com, and of course right here on Locked On Vols. Can't thank you enough for being here. Thanks so much for joining us, and let's get this party started with Tennessee in the NCAA tournament. This is Locked On Vols.